Chapter 12, A Boy at War by Harry Mazer. For the first time, Adam was alone, and fear came. He'd been going and going, one thing and then another. No time to think, no time to be scared. Now Davy's bloodied face was in front of him, and Martin holding his chest, and himself, and the water, and the Arizona, crumpled like a piece of paper. He was tired. He was beyond tired. He was exhausted. He wanted to go home, to be in his own bed with a blanket over his head and not have to think or remember. It was all too strange, too awful. He climbed down the ladder, back to the rowboat, thinking he'd row back to where they'd left the bikes and go home. But when he got in the rowboat, he couldn't do anything. He sat, head down, arms wrapped around his knees. Water slapped among the pilings. The boat rocked, and Adam rocked with it. Maybe he slept. A chill wind woke him. He smelled smoke and heard muffled explosions. He opened and closed his hands. He blinked his eyes and turned his neck. Everything worked. Reaching around, he touched the edge of the wound. It was raw and it stung. He couldn't believe he'd been shot. Soldiers were shot, not kids. He looked down and counted his bare toes. Susie, Doozy. A small brown bird flitting among the pilings caught his attention. It was carrying bits of straw to a hole in one of the timbers. Maybe the bird had a nest there. Davy would know. He'd ask him when he got back. "Sailor!" Up on the pier, a man, one arm in a sling, was calling to Adam. With the light behind him, he looked huge. "Sailor!" he called. "Does that pile of crap hold water?" "Yes, sir." The man came down the ladder, one-armed but fast, and dropped into the boat. There were officers' bars on his collar. "Row!" he ordered. "Sir," Adam began to explain that he was just a kid, not a sailor. "Sailor, shut your mouth! Get the slop bucket moving!" Adam rowed into the open. He didn't want to do it, didn't want to leave the safety of the pier, but it was just one more crazy thing in a crazy day. In the real world, he knew what to expect. Sure, unexpected things happen, but most things happen in a regular way. Every day he got up, got dressed, and went to school. On Saturday, he cleaned his room, and on Sunday, they went to church. Not like this, where everything that happened was like nothing that had ever happened before. "Roll, sailor! Put your back into it!" The officer swore. He swore at the Japanese, at their bad manners and their lousy timing. "Sunday morning! They sneak attack us? For God's sakes, I was in bed with my wife. Roll, sailor!" "Where are we going, sir?" "The Westie!" He checked his watch. "What time is it, sir?" "Will you row and shut up?" He adjusted his arm in the sling. "It's 0850. Adam fixed his eyes on the officer's big, chunky face. "Sir, Lieutenant Pelko, sir, do you know him?" Officers knew one another. "Pelko? What kind of name is that?" "What ship?" "The Arizona." "The Arizona? Well, take a look," he said furiously. He pointed to where the smoke was thickest. "There, that's what's left of it. That pile of scrap. The USS Arizona is gone," he said bitterly. Adam thought about his father, how clever he was, how he could do anything. He'd been in the Navy a long time, and he was so smart. He could have seen it coming and gotten out. Somehow he'd gotten off in time before the ship was hit. Maybe he was on the West Virginia right now. "Starboard, sailor, more starboard!" The officer pushed down on the oar. His hand over Adam's was like a piece of carpet, warm and hairy. "Where do we get sailors like you? Babies." A launch passed close enough for the officer to jump to his feet and order it alongside. "Come on now, move! Never mind tying on. Give me a hand." Not waiting for anyone, he leaped across and fell into the launch, still shouting orders. A sailor on the launch grabbed for Adam and swung him aboard. The launch never stopped moving. The rowboat was left to drift. As they passed the battleships, one after another. The men on the launch became silent. It was like an earthquake had hit. The USS Oklahoma had turned over and was lying on its side, propellers sticking up in the air. The water around the once proud battleship was thick with oil, and it stunk. Smoke and filth. Life rafts, pieces of boats, and men floundered in the watery debris. The West Virginia was just aft of the Arizona, and it was on fire. The officer stood ready to board his ship. High above them, men on the Westie were looking down and cheering. Adam searched their faces, looking for his father, but they were too far away to be seen clearly. He scrambled up the ladder after the officer. On the main deck, Adam ran one way, then the other. "Pelko," he kept saying. "Lieutenant Pelko?" The sailors looked at him blankly and kept going. Adam ran through dark, narrow passageways, down ladders, then up ladders. The ship shook. Adam was blown through a doorway. A hail of debris clattered down around him. Boulders seemed to be bouncing around the decks. Men were screaming. Everything was loose and coming apart. The noise was deafening, as if the ships were being sledgehammered to pieces. In his passageway, a sailor with an axe tore open a locked ammunition trunk. A box was thrust into Adam's hands, and he was ordered to follow the man ahead of him. Out on the deck next to the gun pod, a colored sailor crouched over twin machine guns, shooting at the attacking planes. The deck shook. Adam dropped the box. Pieces of the ship and pieces of men rained down around him. A foot, an arm. He saw everything through a red haze. He ran. He slipped in blood. The launch was still at the foot of the ladder, and he fled the ship.